Welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 27, I do believe. Now that glad I got that one right. My name's Lee. I'm from Western Australia. This week I'm joined by Vicus,
Yo,
who's in Canberra, and we've got Tim Andrews from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, who is in Sydney.
he's making his second appearance on the show.
Second appearance, yeah. So this week we're going to be talking about
the second appearance that you're actually apparently screening. This is actually my fourth appearance. You just decided to erase the first two.
Yeah. It's the kind of guy
You've
Vicus
to
is.
handle the truth.
Vicus likes to complain about censorship, but he indulges in it all the time. So we just can't. That's why he put it in me in
It's
control.
not censorship if it's your incompetence.
That's true. Okay, this week, speaking of incompetence, we're going to be talking about the fallout of the Libs bill. So we've had a week to see what happened with that, and we've also got the new Turnbull ministry has just been sworn in today. So we'll start off just...
I just want to interject here. I call it the Nats bill.
That's...
Based on... So,
The fact that you're trying to be funny.
I'm not trying to be funny. No. I agree with the Liberal Party. The term liberal has been confusing people from their voting intentions. To avoid confusion, I've decided to refer to them as the Nationals.
Okay, well, nevertheless, they had a change of leadership. So, Tim, since you weren't actually with us here last week, how about you give your thoughts on just the lead up to the spill itself, you know, the kind of the happenings in the last week as well, and then maybe we'll get into the Turnbull ministry side of things in a little bit.
I think this bill was inevitable, and it's sad that it was inevitable, but it's ultimately Tony was responsible for it. It was very clear from even before the start of the year that Tony Abbott had to do two things. He had to replace his chief of staff to stop, first of all, the dysfunction in the Prime Minister's office, and to stop the mentality of command and control centralisation, which was unprecedented in Australian political history through that office, which created a culture of yes-menism, a culture of stifling ideas and dissent, and horrendous problems with centralisation. And secondly, Tony Abbott had to replace the failed Treasurer, Joe Hockey, whose lack of sound economic management and poor communication was seriously costing the government in the opinion polls. Tony Abbott had to do both of those things. He was told by senior figures in the party he had to do those things. He refused to do those things, which made this bill inevitable and self-inflicted.
Yep.
Yeah.
To be honest, I have to say I thought when it was inevitable that this bill would happen and Tony would lose, that Tony would bow out. He would anoint Scott Morrison. With the right's backing, Scott Morrison would have sailed to victory. And a good dozen of the people who voted for Malcolm did so with gritted teeth. They don't like Malcolm. They don't like the direction he'll take the party in. They are much more of the right side of the party, but they want to change. If Scott Morrison could have brought them across, it surprises me that I would have expected that, and I suspect one of the reasons why this bill, it didn't happen was that this bill happened so quickly. The ballot happened so quickly. I think if there was a more drawn-out process, it would now be Prime Minister Morrison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
I think it was Abbott's attempt to bluff people because he thought it wasn't. Scott would have gotten it if he'd waited a few days. He tried to play the bluff and he failed.
Mm. I mean, one of the things I heard from sort of the commentary out in the days after was that Scott Morrison, and whether this is actually what he thinks or whether it's just they've heard from a person who heard from the person who heard it from a person who made it up, that, Scott Morrison's only like 46, both Abbott and Turnbull are a lot older. They're in their 60s, I think, or 50s or something. So, he's still got a lot of time. Malcolm Turnbull can be Prime Minister for a couple of terms, and then, Scott Morrison will still be young enough to be leader, at a future stage. And, I think that's pretty reasonable. Especially since he gets to be treasurer for a while, and if Turnbull self-destructs, then he's the natural successor. So, strategically, it's probably not a bad thing. But just to go back to the loyalty thing, I mean, I was reminded...
Except, I would say if Turnbull self-destructs, Scott Morrison will be leader of the opposition, but he won't be Prime Minister.
It's true.
Yeah.
But even if
you won't see It's just it's rare for someone to. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
I was just going to say, well, I mean, Scott Morrison will be the leader of the opposition no matter what. Like, if Turnbull self-destructs, he'll be leader of the opposition. If Turnbull succeeds, unless Turnbull's anticipating running for Prime Minister till the end of time, eventually the Liberals will get voted out and Morrison will be, presumably...
This is Malcolm Turnbull here. He may, in fact, be considering running until the end of time.
But that is a good point.
I was going to say, that is a likely possibility. But here's the thing, right? I'm not... I've heard this Scott Morrison thing brought up several times before, and I don't think he didn't seem to be lining up in that way. He just seemed to be... I mean, he's been a very powerful performer as a cabinet minister. He's been very powerful in both ministries that he's held. I just didn't see him placing himself in that leadership position. I just thought he was, an effective foot soldier who one day will, take over.
Which is why it would have taken Abbott to stand down in favour of Morrison.
Right.
Morrison wouldn't have... If Abbott wanted the right to retain control of the Prime Ministership, Morrison was his only choice, and if Abbott had stood aside and supported Morrison, then Morrison would have run. I don't think Morrison would ever have challenged Abbott.
Yeah, that was my impression of it anyway.
I mean, it's not like there's a whole lot of options. Like, there's not exactly a whole lot of choices. Like, essentially, it's... Like, hockey used to be a choice until he decided to canvass his supporters on climate change back when Abbott and Turnbull were having it out the first time round.
Actually, no, hockey used to be a choice until he started canvassing people, and they talked to hockey and they realised, dear God, I will never support you.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, really there isn't that much depth in the talent pool, which, I mean, that's not like Labour is any better. So, really, I mean, Scott Morrison's a good choice amongst a bunch of mediocre choices. And maybe there is somebody coming up in the ranks who'll be good enough, but it's hard to see at this stage, like, who will kind of rise to the top out of the younger sort of ministers and members of the parliament.
I agree with that assessment.
Yeah, and I think a large part of that, I mean, we've made the comment before on the show that basically what Abbott had was Howard's B team. It was on the tail end of Howard's years.
Yeah.
There were people who were getting on, people who really should be looking at retirement, and they were just kind of there collecting their public servant paychecks.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. That wasn't you who came up with that, was it?
Yeah, I think I said that to you like in 2012, dude, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't the first, but yeah, I might have been the one that brought it to you. I don't know.
I heard somebody making that argument a few weeks ago, and it was absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Maybe someone from mainstream media was listening to your podcast and copied it.
Well, it would be interesting if someone from mainstream media copied that, because I've heard that around the party since like 2009. There were people saying, the shadow ministry is old. They're basically still Howard ministry people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it, in 2013 when the election was going on, and it's just like 11 of my ministers are from the Howard ministry. I sat there and went like, that's actually a problem. That's not something you want to advertise.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's probably somewhat of a feature just of long-term governments. I mean, you think about what happened after Menzies stepped down. You had 3 different prime ministers in that state. Well, one of them died, so that's fair enough. But you had a bunch of change during that period.
Yeah, well, look, the jury's still out on that. I mean,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, he could have joined the Charcoms. But then you had
somewhere.
Yes, the jury's still out on Harold Holt.
Yeah, and then you had a lot of change. So you had Whitlam, and then the Malcolm Fraser. That period wasn't exactly the most stable time. I mean, I guess they did win multiple elections, which is more than what you can say about the last few prime ministers. But
I'm just like, Malcolm Fraser was the third longest serving PM. I don't understand how that's not stability. That's pretty stable to me.
Menzies, Howard, then Bob Hawke. Because I mean, then essentially you had Bob Hawke. You had the Hawke Keating Howard years, which is like a 20 year, 25 year stretch of just of really continuous governance.
If you look particularly at the first half of the Australian history, then governments weren't particularly stable at all. In fact,
No.
you had at least one prime minister who was prime minister 3 times under 3 different political
Yeah,
parties.
that's it.
So it's not just like Kevin Rudd coming back. You had one prime minister in 3 different parties. Another prime minister was also prime minister 3 times, I think, in 2 different parties.
Yeah.
So
I guess, I mean, people, like, in some ways we compare, and to be perfectly frank, I mean, Hawke, Keating, Howard, and Costello, we might as well throw him in there. Like, those guys are either really savvy politicians or incredibly intelligent and really know their stuff. Like, I think, though, it's hard to deny, whether you think their policies were good or not, it's hard to deny that they're actually really good at what they did. It's really hard to compare anybody to those guys. I mean, really, there's not anybody else. I guess Menzies and maybe people from his era, there might be a couple, but it's a very high standard.
So can I say, is it actually possible for us to draft Peter Costello in?
He's not that old.
Yeah, and quite frankly, he'd be decent at the job.
Yeah.
Like, not bad. Maybe
there is a Facebook group which I may or may not be an admin of, which is Bring Back Peter Costello.
Yeah. What about the Draft Peter Costello group?
Yeah.
It's a shame. On mine? I've got one of them.
It's a shame that it's not US politics where you can like draft people in for the primary like at the last minute, and you just have like a big convention, and then just right at the last minute we bring in the draft Peter Costello signs, and you can come back. But it's
no, I don't think he'd like it. But
no, he's probably getting paid a fortune.
The next event Peter Costello speaking at, we just protest it.
Yeah.
Do a picket line with Bring Back Pete. They goes, "We love you, Pete." That sort of thing. Because they're blowing kisses to him.
I would be happy to do that.
To be perfectly fair though, like, well, firstly, he's probably getting paid an absolute fortune in the private sector, whatever the hell that he actually is doing these days. And secondly,
why he needs to be drafted.
The mystique is there. So this is one of the things about politics. It's like in anything. When you don't have a clear idea of what they'll actually do, they seem like a very attractive candidate. It's when they actually come into the job and you realise that actually, like everybody else, their feet are made of clay, that you actually realise the problems. So Peter Costello is great as a theoretical candidate because he was a pretty good treasurer. He can talk the goods because now he's out of politics. He can talk all this liberal stuff, and his columns in newspapers are actually pretty great. Like I think he's a pretty good columnist.
Yep.
But as soon as you actually get him back, well, he's actually, to be fair, Sir is Latham. Latham's a very different sort of columnist, but like they actually, both of them are reasonably insightful. But it's when you actually get them in the nitty gritty that we realize politics has such a corrosive effect on people because it just brings out, it drags people down. And you can be a great person in the private sector, you can be a great person overall, but the nature of politics is not nice. It is very unpleasant. It's very toxic. And I don't think there's anything unique. Like, I think it's just the nature of when you can take somebody else's money without their permission, you've got a different set of incentives. And we take a lot of other people's money without their permission, so the incentives are very, very different. Maybe even compared to previous eras. But yeah, I think I don't know if maybe there is a future Hawke, Keating, Howard, Costello team somewhere out there. Maybe not. I mean, but I think going back and actually drafting Peter Costello, it's a novel idea. It's funny, but I don't think it wouldn't actually solve anything.
So Tim has a good insight onto the liberal side of things, at least. I'm sure he's seen someone who's Costello-esque and Howard-esque within the party coming up through the ranks. Maybe he can drop a few names. And he's not going to.
Are you there, Tim? No, he might be gone.
He's gone. You heard the question.
No, Tim. Yes, Tim is gone. Tim is gone. He's bad connection problem. Sorry, can't hear you.
Okay. Maybe while we wait for.
I think there is a genuine dearth of talent. I mean, there is definitely some great people on the Liberal side, but there is a. I don't think we've got a Costello Howard coming up anytime soon.
Okay. No. But on the Labour side, I'm surprised that there's no Hawke and Keating types. It seems
but they've all been purged from the party. The Labour Party's got rid of the Hawke Keating types from the party. The Labour Party now has only, and the Liberal Party's possibly together. Well, no, it's either got careerist vacuums completely,
or progressives.
feral or progressive trots. And, old school anti-Thatcher socialists like Doug Cameron.
Yeah.
But there's no Hawke Keating type visionary progressive in the sense of economically reformist type.
I mean, Martin Ferguson's about as close as you get in recent years. I mean, certainly what he's been saying. But look how they treated him. They're literally trying to kick him out of the party because they hate him so much because he actually says stuff that's totally reasonable, and calls out bullshit about, like all the stuff to do with the Poles and Wires campaign, all this sort of, Martin Ferguson, maybe it's partially again because he's out of politics. It allows him to be a bit more honest, but even towards the end of his career, he said some really great things. Like that if the Labor Party was like that, I'd join the Labor Party.
You also had good people there at the time, from the left, Lindsay Tanner, from the right, originally Craig Emerson, before he got crushed and his spirit destroyed over parallel importing and decided to give up.
Before he got into
good people.
Before he got into bed, literally and figuratively, with Julia Gillard. Oh
no, he was able to survive that one somehow. Although the emotional trauma was a bit too long lasting.
What about Andrew Lee, the complete sellout?
Yeah.
Andrew Lee.
But look, having said that, there are plenty of examples in history of people who, throughout their entire political career, were dirty, evil, horrendous sellouts, then became in a position of power, like, ta-da, let's do all of these reforms.
That's
on the left, I think LBJ would probably be the biggest example of this in his civil rights legislation. I mean, most of his political career, he was, yes, I'm an evil racist Southerner. He becomes president. Aha! Now that I have power, I'm going to go against everything I've said and do what I believe in.
It's interesting. I mean, Bob Hawke is an ex-ACTU president. I mean, if you look at, for what we know of unions, and obviously I wasn't born when he was ACTU president, so it's hard for me to really say, and I haven't written that much about him. But if you say that, Jed Kearney is going to turn out to be the next great economic reformer, you'd be like, what are you smoking? So even with something like that, I think it was...
the problem is that you now have a much more sclerotic system based on patronage rather than merit, which works. I mean, a patronage system works for a couple of generations, but the problem is that after a couple of generations, the talented pool just dries out. It's what you see in all these sort of regimes and the same thing's happening to the union movement, the same thing happening to the Labour Party, the same thing's going to happen to the Liberal Party, they're just not there yet.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should move on to the ministry changes and all this sort of stuff, because we're about halfway through, so...
but we can sort of tack on about this notion of patronage. I mean, if we take a look at the ministry selection, right? I took one look at it and went like, oh, hey, it's the Oprah ministry. You get a ministry. You get a ministry. You get a ministry. I was just surprised with so many names up there.
So it's,
although the total number of ministers hasn't gone up.
So the total number of cabinet ministers has gone up by 1, but the total number of assistants and all of that hasn't changed. Yeah. No, it hasn't gone down. It's the same.
Oh, I thought it said...
No, it's exactly the same.
It's gone up. It's gone from 51 to 55. The RPA put out a thing today saying that there was...
What?
It was 51 under Abbott, and it's now 55 under Turnbull. Just the total executive appointments, like the total...
No, but... Okay. No. I was talking about the number of people.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, a number of people wise, it's still the same, but you're right in the sense that there's more... So there's this entirely new thing. The PALSEC has changed from being PALSECs because they were being confused internationally to the assistant...
I actually do know of at least one case where a certain parliamentary secretary was part of a parliamentary delegation over to Washington, and he was literally shunted into like some back room of a cheap motel because everyone thought he was literally the secretary.
Which is funny because they have secretaries of state and defence and all that sort of stuff. So
yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's hilarious. So but basically they've changed it to assisting minister. Sorry, the minister assisting the minister or something. Some weird thing like that. It sounds very
assistant minister to the minister.
Yeah. So It sounds very yes, Prime Minister.
Which gets slightly more confusing in Treasurer because you've got an Assistant Treasurer as well.
Yeah.
So you've got an Assistant Treasurer and an Assistant Minister to the Treasurer.
Yeah, and we should point out that there's 42 people who are part of the executive. There's only 90 members in the coalition party room total. So basically, half of everybody, like half of the people in the room, have got.
I'm sorry, there are not 40 people part of the executive. That's not right.
The
total.
I'm telling you.
No. The total number of cabinet positions is 41, including 21.
That's executive council. The cabinet is only 21 people.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Sorry,
cabinet is only in a ministry.
Let me find the exact language, but basically, people who are appointed to be part of. Let me see. Let me find the article.
Those sort of, like parliamentary secretary of the cabinet.
There's 42 executive office holders. That's the wording they use in this Freedom Watch article.
So. Okay, so
anyway.
I would agree. So the way the Freedom Watch article the Freedom Watch is done by the IPA, by the way. Now the reason why I would agree with them on the language there, yes. The reason why I would agree with them on the language for that is basically the parsecs. I'm going to say parsecs because I hate the new terminology completely, but they are paid extra on top of what their normal salaries are. And cabinet ministers are paid on top of that. So I think it goes like 115,000 if you're just a standard backbencher, and it jumps up to 185,000 if you're a parsec. Yeah, and then it jumps to 255,000 base if you're a if you're an actual minister, and it goes up even further if you're in one of the high end ones like defense, treasury, and social services. I think I can't remember, but there's 5 other ones that have an increased payload.
So anyway, we've probably talked about it a lot enough. Let's talk about the actual people and who's been rewarded and who's been not awarded. So, what do we think of the actual people who are now? Actually, I just put a list up that's totally wrong. My bad. Anyway, that's the chat of this thing. Because it's got Joe Hockey as treasurer, I'm like, that's not the right thing anymore.
No.
So anyway, what do we think of the changes to the cabinet and the changes to?
Goodbye, Joe Hockey.
Goodbye, Joe Hockey. Can't be said enough.
I think there is universal celebration around the country that particular miserable failure has moved on. We wish him well in greener pastures, although I'm worried if he's as ambassador to the US, we're going to lose the free trade agreement within 3 months, the ANZUS Treaty will be gone within 6, and we may in fact be in a full-blown war by the end of the year.
But I got to bring freedom,
man. Well, the thing is, though, okay, Joe Hockey was bad, but there's no real assurance that ScoMo is going to be any better.
Especially since there's no actual policy changes.
Okay, there is, and here's why. Joe Hockey was terrible on policy and an incompetent, bumbling buffoon. And we've known both of these things throughout Joe Hockey's entire history of running departments. His failure as tourism minister, his failure as finance minister, his... I'm not going to completely blame him for his failures at workplace relations, but he was a failure there as well. So we know that, as respect of policy, he's bad at politics. Scott Morrison, we know, is actually good at selling a message. He's good at dealing with crossbenchers. He's good at dealing with the media. So simply from the very fact that he might be able to not make everyone hate the concept of a small budget cut and it can deal with people, that is an obvious improvement, even if the policies stay the same. And I suspect some of the policies will be improved anyway.
Hopefully.
You hope so. I mean, it's not hard to get much better, but
the other thing is, the Treasury team I think Kelly O'Dwyer as Assistant Treasurer will do a good job. And I think having as an Assistant Minister to the Treasury and Alex Hawke, who is one of the few libertarians in Parliament, is also a very good thing. I mean, we're talking about the only person in the Liberal Party who spoke out against things like paid parental leave. The only person in the Liberal Party in House of Representatives who voted against the local government bill. I mean, we're talking as one of the key people in the Treasury portfolio, someone who's had a record of standing up to the Liberal Party when they've done really bad things. And I think that's a good positive that we've got having him as part of the finance team.
Yep, I was going to say. There's a lot of actually interesting. So you got Mitch Fifield as well.
Well, and Mitch, and by the way, Mitch Fifield is the first, as close as we can get. I mean, Mitch is a classical Liberal. He's the only one we've got in the ministry.
Yep.
So Mitch, I think, will do a great job in communication and arts. Mitch is, I think, someone who's been probably also frustrated with some of the economic policies of the government. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him about this, but I suspect that he would be somebody who would be taking his portfolio in a more free market direction to the extent that he is able, because he's, as I said, and it's good to have a classical Liberal in cabinet.
Yeah. Better than none.
Yeah.
One's better than none.
Yes, one is better than none, and he's certainly the one.
Yeah. And I was also going to say, well, there was Kelly O'Dwyer, which we've already mentioned. Who was the other one I was thinking of? There was, I don't know.
What do we think of Maurice Payne for defence?
I don't care. I personally don't care.
Well, tell me, other than Brendan Nelson, have we had a defence minister in the last 20 years who has gone on to do anything from after defence? It hasn't been a kiss of death for them? I've been trying to think. I think in the last 20-odd years, it's only been Nelson who survived defence.
Yeah.
No, technically, so I don't know how you want to say kiss of death, because Bronnie did defence like way back in 1996. In fact, I think she was.
She was
Kim Beazley. Kim Beazley was Minister of Defence.
Well, yes, but that was over 20 years ago.
That's right.
Bronnie was, I think, only junior Minister of Defence. She wasn't the full Minister for Defence.
Oh, okay.
I think. But look, Maurice, I would say, on many issues, Maurice Payne is far too left-wing ideologically for me. But putting her in defence, I don't think she can do any damage at all from that perspective. It's good that he hasn't gone to someone from South Australia. It would have been horrific if Chris Pine or someone got it. So look, Maurice needed a promotion, allegedly.
Oh, wow.
I don't think she can do much damage in defence, so...
Well,
okay. So
unless it comes to handing out pork. I mean, that's the worst you can really do, is dealing with the submarines issue.
So just bringing up the list of former defence ministers...
Bear in mind, Senator Payne has had a strong interest in defence, and she might have some good ideas there. I would have had a concern if she was in an economic portfolio. She's not... So I think that's a good decision from Malcolm.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. So just looking at the past list, you've got John Faulkner, Stephen Smith, Joel Fitzgibbon, Robert Hill.
All out of Parliament after defence.
Yeah, Peter Reith, out of Parliament.
That was his last post.
Yeah, John Moore. I think that was his last post as well.
Last post.
And Ian McLaughlin.
So basically, defence is the place where hopes go to die.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Because, here's the thing, right? A defence minister is essentially led around by defence. They don't really have very much power. I'm just people give a lot of shit about the defence minister, but in reality, they don't do very much.
Which is funny because, it's one of the few ministries that actually has, a basis in the Constitution at a federal level. Most of what happens at the federal level has got nothing to do with the Constitution.
If it was up to me, I would go to 7 ministries at most. I think we need, at most, probably we can keep Prime Minister, Treasurer, Home Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Defence, maybe Attorney General, maybe Communications. But yeah, I think you can fit everything back in 5 ministries. Have a couple of
just go back to the Barton ministry. I think there was about 14 people.
Yeah,
it was easy.
So I remember someone saying there used to be some constitutional limit on executive ministers, and then they got rid of it or something.
Really?
Yeah, it was something Jeremy Travers told me. Now I don't know enough about the Constitution.
If Jeremy Travers told you something about constitutional history, I would believe it.
Yeah, I know. That guy reads so much about it. I had this discussion with him, and I was just when did this happen? Apparently, at some point after World War II, which makes sense to me. Everything after World War II, this country just went, let's just do everything with the feds.
Yeah.
After World War II.
All right. Well, we're basically hitting up about the 30-minute mark. Are there any final thoughts on the Turnbull ministry before we wrap up?
Too close. It's too soon to call. I don't know.
I'm sad that a couple of people got because I will say, I know he's been unpopular recently, but I think it's a shame that Erica Betts is out. I think that his lack of activity in workplace relations had nothing to do with his talent as a minister, but rather the fact that he literally wasn't allowed to do anything by the government. Yeah. So I think that's a shame. I think overall it's a fairly good mix of right and left in the ministry. He's kept quite a lot of Abbott loyalists there, which is good. But it's definitely a new ministry, like generational change, which is the message. You know, we're the party of the future, we're the progress. Have to see how things go.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. Like, it's all good and well to change the faces, but if you don't change the policies, it doesn't make any difference at all. And that's my number one take-home message from the Gillard-Rudd years, which is they changed the faces, or at least the prime ministership, but they never changed the policies, and that's why they got voted out. Because,
so what would you like to see? What would you like to see them change?
Well, come up with a budget that's actually serious. Like, I mean, I don't like. I'm not one of those people who think, you know, the next budget needs to be like 1 page long. Like, I think, you know, for the foreseeable future, the federal government's going to do a lot, but at least push it in the right direction. Like, actually, not just have a slight dip in the growth, like in the budget, and then a very minor slowing in the growth of spending. Like, I think if you just actually had some serious stuff, even if we were still spending more, even if it was just significantly reducing the growth of spending, I'd find that more credible and more serious. And I think that's probably the number one thing is, like, Joe Hockey couldn't even sell.
You do have to remember, at the last budget, you sort of had that, the first budget, and then Joe Hockey went, oh, fuck it, let's just blow everything on the medical research.
No, it was bad. It was a terrible budget. There was nothing.
No, it was. But you look at the numbers, you could see they were starting to do it. And then by the end, and at the last minute, Hockey put in all of these big spending policies, which meant that rather than cutting spending, we just spent money differently.
Yeah, okay.
If you just kept the original cuts and not all of the additional spending. Hopefully now that you have Hockey out of the picture.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just that, like, that really undermined their credibility. I mean,
of course. And also undermined us because they lost all of the political capital. Yeah. All of the political capital was, we're cutting spending. So they copped all the flack, and then they didn't end up cutting spending.
Yeah.
Idiots.
Yeah.
Idiocy.
Well, anyway.
Calm
down, Tim. Calm down.
We're gonna go put Tim back in his box.
We have to end it.
Yeah,
we have to end it.
Start it.
So, what I just wanted to say, I'm actually on my way to Cambodia tomorrow, and I'll be hanging out at the Liberty on the Rocks Cambodian edition right there this Friday. So,
cool.
If I believe we actually have 2 listeners who are in Singapore, or at least that's what popped up on my list last time, which I don't know if it's true.
Wow, that's so close to Cambodia.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. Just pop on a flight, come over. I know it's like a 2-hour flight, so yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that's been episode 27 of Taking Liberties. Thanks for joining us, Tim, and have fun in Cambodia, Vickers. And we will be back next week with more discussion about liberty and politics and other stuff.